Welcome to the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board of Education Candidates Forum. My name is Reg Hildebrand. I am a professor of Afro-American Studies and History at UNC Chapel Hill, and I will be moderator for this event, which is being sponsored by the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools PTA Council and the Chapel Hill Carrboro NAACP Education Committee and the Chapel Hill Carrboro chapter of PAGE. Three organizations that may have different constituencies, all working and planning together to make this event both effective and inclusive. We thank our candidates who have offered their services to help shape educational policy. On behalf of all of the sponsoring organizations, I would acknowledge and express our regrets that scheduling has caused this event to be taking place at the beginning of the High Holy Day of Rosh Hashanah. Let me begin to outline what we'll be doing. The names and backgrounds of the organizations are in the handouts that you have received. Also, in order to save time, we will not be introducing the distinguished candidates, but have asked them instead to prepare a written statement about their background and vision for the district, and we ask you all to please read those statements. During the first hour, will consist of questions that have been submitted in advance by the public and that have been selected by the three sponsoring organizations. These questions are available in the handout that you have, and I believe they've also been provided to all of the candidates. If, as you look at those questions, you find that there is one that you would like to ask that is not listed there, you can write your question on one of the index cards that have been and are still being distributed to you. And if you would like to put the question yourself to the candidates, please also write your name on the card. Otherwise, someone will ask. As you know, ask it for you. As you know, without my saying, that although we would like to ask all of the questions that we receive, and we'll be collecting after the fifth question, and I will give you a warning when that's approaching. But we will only time will only permit us to answer some small portion of those questions. The second hour will be your questions being put to the council, to the candidates for the school board. Here is the format of how the questions will be asked. Each candidate will be asked, will have a chance to answer each question. Three of the candidates will have 2 minutes to answer the question, and the remaining three will have 1 minute. As we cycle through the questions, the order in which each candidate is asked the question and the time that they have will change, so by the end, everyone will have the same amount of time to answer questions. When you are one of the persons with a 1 minute answer, we ask that you, if possible, not merely repeat what has been said, but to add something to that, and it is perfectly acceptable to say, I agree, and then we'll pass on to something else. After the sixth question, there will be a 5 minute break, just for 5 minutes before we go to the second part of the program. This forum will be broadcast live on public access TV and rebroadcast on WCHL radio tomorrow at 7 p.m. We ask the candidates and each person who is asking questions to please speak into the microphones so that you can be heard on the air. And we ask that you now turn off your cell phone so that they will not be heard at all. And let us begin. The first question, and we do ask and have spoken to all of the candidates to keep their eye on the timekeeper, and we hope that things will move smoothly. The first question comes from the PTA, and it will go to James Barrett, Jamesetta Bedford, and Mia Burrows in that order for 2 minutes.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Gary Wallach. I have a 9th grader at Carborough High, and I've been with the PTA Council for several years now. The question is fairly short and direct, so hopefully you won't have a lot to think about or discuss. Many parents feel that the communication between them, the district, and the board is lacking. As an example, when a member of the public comes to comment at a board meeting, there is no feedback. No follow-up questions are asked by the board to clarify their understanding, no comments are made, and no contact information is obtained from the constituent. This is correct parliamentary procedure, but it is hardly a model for effective communication. Would you be willing to attend regular, periodic meetings sponsored by the PTA Council where an open back and forth discussion could take place on issues of parent, teacher, and student concerns?
Thank you, Gary. And thank all of you for being here and watching at home. I think my first answer is yes. That's a straightforward answer to a straightforward question. But I think it goes deeper than that. In some ways, the question doesn't mention teachers, for example. And you mentioned being at Carborough High, and that's certainly a concern. What we've seen at Carborough High recently, lack of two-way communication between the board and teachers. And I think this is one way that we can address that. I certainly recognize this is a problem and think that the board should do something to address it. There are other ways that could be addressed. Procedure at SIT meetings, for example, which is very similar to what the Chapel Hill Town Council does as well, is to have the board sometimes when they choose, it's up to them based on the comment, but they can make a choice as to whether to accept an opinion, refer it to staff, to bring back for future agenda, those kind of choices. It at least, you don't necessarily want to get into a two-way conversation during the middle of every board meeting. They go on forever. But at least you have some acknowledgement that the board has heard the comments and the promise of future action on those comments as well. I also think this is an area, I know there are many on the board, I suppose majority because it doesn't happen today, but another way to address this would be have more board committees to address specific items. Not a whole bunch of standing committees, but I think some ad hoc work on really important issues that require community input would allow us to have more of that back and forth conversation, not taking up a full board's time every 2 weeks.
Thank you.
I actually get to do this since I'm the PTA liaison. I do meet with the PTA Council each month and enjoy it. Overall, I think having periodic meetings that are open to the entire public and that are published well in advance can be done. We have to be careful because we're bound by the sunshine laws of this state. Anytime 4 or more of us gather, it has to be announced well in advance to the press and the public. So we don't want to move our official board meetings, you know, from official board meetings to occasional meetings with various groups. It needs to be accessible by all. That said, improving communications using both the website and just like we did with the superintendent search where we had meetings at East Chapel Hill High, at Hargraves, we had forums, was very effective. The turnout wasn't great, but it was far better than any other districts had, and it worked and we got input. And we can also use our surveys and other methods. I think it's important to remind, because I think a lot of parents don't know about our decision-making model, which is any critical, and we probably faltered in the last 3 years in following it. Any critically important issue should be sent out by administration to both school improvement teams and PTAs, and any particular district committees, so that feedback then gets to the central office people who are coordinating it, to the superintendent. The superintendent may or may not agree with that feedback, but it is all supposed to be provided to the board so that the superintendent's recommendation comes to us, but we have a fuller picture. It's also imperative then that we seek input from underrepresented groups, which probably are not actually our PTA officers, but are from other areas in the community. So that's, I think, where I think we could do a better job. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you to the groups for going ahead and doing this. And of course, the short answer is yes. Although I actually think, given the collaboration that we're seeing here tonight with the PTA, the NAACP Education Committee, and PAGE, actually, I might want to expand that concept actually really to those three groups and perhaps others as well, because as James has said, not every constituency is represented by our PTA presidents, but the concept is good, absolutely. The other thing I will actually plug is that our new superintendent, Dr. Furcella, is doing now over this next month, and then we'll be through into the spring, what he's calling community conversations. And yes, they're not necessarily with the board, but the model is really interesting. I went to the first one he did at Hargrave Center, and gets lots of input from folks, and people get to be heard. So I encourage everybody to go to those. And the reason this is especially important right now is that we'll be working on our strategic plan going forward. So that is the long answer, which really could be summed up with yes.
Hi. Again, short answer is yes. I think that's why we're all running for the school board, is because we want to be representatives of our community, and we want to hear all the stakeholders that are involved. I love interactive dialogue. That's where I do a better job. This is hard for me because I'm not doing interactive dialogue. I'm just answering one question, and I think it's hard to have an engaging conversation. But it's something I've been doing for 10 years in the district, being on SIT committees, on the soccer fields, in the classroom. So I've been doing engaging conversation for 10 years, and that's something I'd like to continue. I think one thing, the school board has moved their meetings here so it can be more accessible via the TV for everybody to have access to, but we as board members also lose that direct access with the community. We're not able to go to the schools, which we did before, so it's kind of a trade-off, where it might be easier for somebody just to go to their school to hear the school board rather than TV and feel more a part of it. But, and then my time is up. Sorry.
All right, thanks. Thanks for the question, Gary. I heard two parts to that question. One was communication with the board as an entity, and one was communication with individual board members. So the communication with the board as a whole, I think it's important to follow the open meeting rules that we have. I think that's important because that allows everyone to participate in any decisions that the board makes. For an individual board member, I think it's very different, and I have tried to participate in an interactive way with people who are interested in communicating. Early in my tenure, I had coffee hour at Caribou Coffee, and after about a year or so, I just got lonely because I was all there by myself. So, but I have tried to answer almost all the emails that were sent to me. And recently I started my jog and jabber with Mike, and you can come out Sunday mornings at 7:30 at Foster's Market, and we can have a little exercise. We sit an awful lot on the school board, so it's nice to get up and do something active, and we can talk about anything you want. Yeah.
Thank you. With just 1 minute left, I'll just sum it up by saying I do certainly understand that there are challenges, and there have been frustrations with what's perceived as a lack of communication or an instant response to the concerns. But I do support a system that provides an open process for all stakeholders to hear and engage in our decision-making model. The current process of having board liaisons assigned to major district committees is a way in which everyone gets to share their concerns, and then we as board members who are assigned can bring that information back to the board as well as to the superintendent and the administrators who would be assigned to that work. Our board chair has the responsibility of speaking on behalf of the board for decisions that we have made, but not any one of us can deliberate in a committee setting and then make a decision individually without having a public process and having all stakeholders have the opportunity to engage and understand what that impact is. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you. The next question will be asked by the NAACP, and it will go to Ms. Burrows, Ms. Streeter, and Ms. Bedford for 2-minute answers in that order, followed by Mr. Kelly, Mr. Barnett, and Mr. Castellano in that order. NAACP.
Hello, my name is Lalani Shongode, and I am a member of this community and a member of the NAACP's Education Committee. My question is, as you may know, African American Hispanic students are lagging behind their counterparts in academic achievement at alarming rates across the country. Please explain what you feel are the needs, challenges, and barriers that impact the population overall's achievement in Chapel Hill Carborough schools. If your response to this question includes multiple strategies, how would you rank them in importance? And in other words, what should our schools focus on first to improve those achievements of these students?
This is one of those questions that does not lend itself to 2 minutes, but we will all take our our best stab at it. So the important thing that I think everybody knows and remembers is that every kid and child who comes to us on the first day of kindergarten comes with a mix of a little fear, a little anticipation, but they're really wanting to learn and excited about really the whole thing. But not every child comes with the same skill set. Many children, particularly children with less educated parents, will come having heard many, many, many thousands and thousands fewer words at home. They may not have been read to as much, and they may not have had an opportunity to travel. So for me, that is the biggest barrier. There are also issues of race and racism, which, again, we could talk about for days, and that is a factor. I think the factor that the district can most best address is the skills deficit in terms of where kids come when they arrive with us. In terms of how the schools, what we can do, I think the number one thing is improving instruction. We have excellent teachers, many excellent teachers, but at the same time, there is still an unevenness with the quality of our instruction. Again, I think a priority that the board was looking for in a new superintendent was someone who could really get in the classroom and know what he or she were looking at. And I think we achieved that goal. And so I think at the school building level, we'll be seeing rolling out over the next couple of years quite a bit of focus on the quality of instruction. And I give a shout out to our colleague Shel Brownstein, who's also gotten the board specifically focused on literacy and getting our children to be able to read early. And thank you. And there are 2 other things, ask me later.
Well, I'll piggyback right off of that because I think literacy is the most important issue. I think it's why it's continuing as one of our top District 5 priorities for a second year and will necessarily need to continue after this. Children arrive at school, not only African American Hispanic students, but we now are teaching a larger segment of Burmese refugees and other Southeast Asian students who are not at grade level or not prepared with reading. So we have established a partnership with Frank Porter Graham Child Development Center for First School, now called Ready School across the state. And we have pre-Ks at all but one elementary for ages 3 and 4. Really, this needs to begin at birth. It is, even at age 3, late. We need to work to develop our preschools and to relook at and retrain our literacy coaches to look at the actual curriculum. Is this curriculum appropriate? We know no matter what curriculum we use that the majority white and the other Asian cultures and students perform quite well. What curriculum is going to work with our other students? What interventions, what training? To have 2 literacy coaches in every elementary school and to not see as much growth as I would have expected over the last 7 years means something's not working well. I also think that another strategy would be to try to supplement and pay for teachers, especially at elementary grades, to get the AG certification. We hear from all of the parents across all diversities that those K-2 programming with the AG teachers, and I'm forgetting the exact name of it, is it works very well, and that all the kids are benefiting. The other thing that we need to do is provide exceptional education tools for our teachers, because especially at younger ages, that can help and provide teachers additional tools for their toolkit. So those are just some of the things, but instruction and literacy.
And before we go to the 1-minute round, Ms. Streeter for a 2-minute answer.
Thank you. I believe that there are 3 areas where we are challenged and where we have needs, and one of those is improving literacy, improving how we teach children to read and write. And it's critical that the students acquire really strong skills in those areas in order for them to engage and process in all other subjects. And if that's not happening, then they will certainly experience challenges and even deficits if they're not where they need to be in terms of reading and writing. It is the foundation. Some strategies that can assist the district, I think, is for us as board members to continue to generate and be creative in terms of funding increased professional development for our teachers and our staff so that they can continue to engage in culturally proficient practices, as well as consistent use of whatever selected best practice they're using. I think that's one of the challenges that we have had, is that while there is research out there regarding particular practices and frameworks and models on how to teach literacy, we will be a much stronger provider of that instruction if we can ensure that what we've selected can be implemented and rolled out in a consistent manner. And that means we have to train our teachers and our staff on those practices. And it also means that the district may need to commit more local funding to ensure that we have the best quality professional development for our teachers and staff. As all of you know, state funds, federal funds that have been specific for professional development are drying up, and that's where we have to step in. Collaboration with local agencies and community leaders so that students see themselves in a positive way in others, as well as improving the foundation, the climate in our secondary schools. We need students to really strive for excellence and know that it's okay and it's cool to strive for excellence. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think I'm next for a minute. I think there are 2 aspects that I would focus on. One is growth, how much students grow each year, and the second is where they start from. And we finally have seen in our most recent data that the African American and Hispanic groups are starting to grow at a rate which is similar to that of other groups. But as a group, those students tend to start at a place which is much further behind. So whereas I think that there is some further room for improvement in our instructional techniques, and those have been mentioned, I think that we have to focus on providing more time. And that time can be provided through pre-K education, early education, but it also needs to be extended, in my opinion, to after-school tutors, summer school, and perhaps alternative calendars that provide students with different types of opportunities to access more instruction, because otherwise they're just not going to get there.
I think the number one issue that we have here is low expectations. We as a society, extending down into the classrooms, do not have the same expectations for particularly our students of color, and that's just not acceptable to me. I think that Dr. Forcella has talked about some great things in terms of making sure that we expect that every kid can grow, and I expect that he will be bringing that throughout the district over time, and that will really help. I don't believe we should be blaming what happens at home. I think we have the kids for a period of time in our schools, and we need to focus on doing the right things during that time with what we're given to grow each kid, absolutely, as Mike said, but also to have high expectations that every one of them can succeed. I'm really glad that Paige is here with the NAACP, for example, because the under-identification of gifted kids amongst those minority kids is really a problem. So.
think I'm bringing up the rear. What I think is great is that we're hearing a lot of same common themes. And literacy. Literacy is huge. Literacy starts at birth. From the moment the child is born, the spoken word is heard, and that's where literacy starts. So it needs to start first thing. We need to educate our families on how to make that happen. I was fortunate enough to have my third grade teacher give me some instruction on what to do when I had my first child, but not everybody is afforded that same opportunity. So first school, huge. It's something the board has supported for years. Turning it into more of a reality would be great. The other thing, communication, huge. Communication, communication, communication between all of us, between all of you, between teachers and staff and administrators from school to school. We all know that the gap widens as we continue on through our learning, and if we don't identify it early and communicate early and impact early, then the gap's only going to widen.
Thank you. And the next question will come from a representative of Page, which will go to Ms. Bedford, Ms. Castellano, and Ms. Streeter for 2 minutes in that order, followed by Mr. Barrett, Ms. Burrows, and Mr. Kelly for 1-minute answers.
Good evening. I'm Rebecca McMillan, and I am both Vice Chair of Page and also I am one of the parent co-chairs of the Gifted Program Advisory Council for the district. And I wanted to thank everyone for coming. Thanks to No Child Left Behind, American school districts, including ours, focus almost exclusively on the percentage of students that are proficient on end-of-grade tests. North Carolina's 8th grade math tests rank 40th most rigorous in the nation. If 100% of Chapel Hill Carborough students scored proficient on the 40th most rigorous test in our country, whose math education is ranked 24th in the world, would you consider our district successful? What goals, other than 100% proficiency, should our district strive for? How should we measure progress toward these goals? What should the board do to make sure that these other goals are taken as seriously as bringing up all students to a minimum standard?
Thank you. And I need to apologize because I jumped ahead of Annetta at the last question. I was nervous, and sorry about that. Proficiency tests are a bare floor, and we need to remember that when we look at data and we use data. We have the NAACP, but that's a bare bones sampling, a very minimal sampling across the state. We have SAT scores, we have ACT scores, that's helpful. This state has adopted the Common Core curriculum and the North Carolina's essential standards that will be taught effective August 2012. That is one of our other large priorities this year. Having that, we'll have 2 interim years of testing before we are compared with 43 other states. That is long term, but we'll then know where we really do stand. But in terms of success, we need to look at growth measurements. Where did children start, and how much did they grow over the year? This summer, Diane Vilwack Lincoln Center was able to give us some of that information in a measurement that she developed. We need to integrate curriculum. We need to look at other things like not just graduation from high school. We already lead the state. We were second last year. But how many students enrolled in post-secondary education or work, but did they graduate? That's where we fall down as a district. A lot of kids, 90+% enroll, but they don't graduate. We need to follow up. I mean, as a parent, are they happy? You know, as adults, are they happy? East used to do a survey, I don't know if they do, of graduates many years afterwards. When we were doing the superintendent search, we learned that we not only have a minority student achievement gap, but we have a global achievement gap. And we need to make sure that our students are prepared to achieve nationally. We can look at scores, and we do, the number of children who are taking APs and what were their scores and what was the curve like. We can look at participation in honors classes and in those sections, but we need to also just integrate the curriculum and provide that assistance. And it's not just the proficiency for knowing that we have achieved well.
Thank you. A few things that I'd like to respond to with this question. While it's not a perfect system, it is not enough in terms of how we measure student achievement. we do seriously take a look at that information. It's publicly shared. Schools actually put it at the forefront so that their individual school communities know how their students have done. By way of a school improvement plan, the school community gets to engage in what strategies will need to be implemented in order for those students to raise their performance. And the school improvement plan also looks to determine what measures or what strategies will we put in place to better support parents and teachers as well. We can look specifically at subgroups and how they're doing, and while the information is alarming and it's concerning for all of us, I do think that there has been a response at the state level with legislators, but particularly the specialists with the Department of Public Instruction. They have heard from the public and they understand and are beginning to experience from an economic level that we have fallen behind. So the Common Core standards that I'm sure many of you have heard about, as well as revamping the state's essential standards, the curriculum itself has actually been raised, the standards have been raised, and we're going to find that it will be even more difficult for students to achieve at minimum levels. So we have to right now, if we haven't begun to do it already, begin to prepare to engage students at a much rigorous level. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Before going to the 1-minute answers, a 2-minute answer from Ms. Castellano.
While the No Child Left Behind is helpful in identifying a broad group and individual subgroups, it's not overly helpful for the child that is repeatedly not achieving, nor is it very helpful for the child that's consistently meeting expectations. Looking at personal growth is something that everybody's interested in. The other theme here is professional development. If we're not given the opportunity to have professional development for our teachers to learn the newest and best practices to engage in the classroom, then it's going to be hard to bring those students up to speed and learning different things. You know, for example, in my profession of physical therapy, you know, we go to continuing ed every year. If we want to learn new techniques on how to do an ACL repair or, you know, the healing, what's the best practice? Same thing with education. There are best practices and it's constantly changing, and professional development is key for that. So finding the resources to be able to do that, since it's been reduced, eliminated on a state level, is something that's going to be really important for us. The other thing that was mentioned was the Common Core practices. There are currently 6 states in the United States that haven't signed up, so that's quite a few that have, which will make it easier to really compare across the nation and state to state how we're really stacking up and aligning those curriculums so that, you know, from Virginia to North Carolina, are our kids learning the same thing at the same time? Are we comparing apples to apples? We all want to strive for 100%. I think none of us will settle until everything is 100%. Will that ever happen? Who knows? But that's something that we all need to strive for on an annual and ongoing basis. Thanks.
I'm going to double check here since we're making mistakes. The goal question was about the goals other than 100% proficiency. And for me, if we're going to have high expectations for every kid, the obvious goal is to measure growth. And we as a district have begun to get better at that. We certainly, the board is looking basically once a year at a set of growth metrics, which are very interesting and show a lot of really good data at a detailed level. The SIT teams are beginning to use that in at their school level, but the question is, why is that not being applied at the teacher level? Teachers need to focus on the same things. If we're going to meet our district goals, which I believe should be 100% growth of expected growth for every kid, then we ought to be doing that all the way down to a teacher level to make sure that it happens. And one of the really interesting things, I say 100% expected growth, our standard actually is only 60% of kids should grow an expected year every year. Unacceptable to me.
So I think the themes have been hit. Growth, growth, and growth is I think where we're looking in terms of really wanting to be able to see how all our students are doing. I'll just reflect that I think No Child Left Behind is becoming increasingly irrelevant. And one of the things that the board has been working with is a strategic plan that's pretty tied to a lot of the measures from No Child Left Behind. And I think that, again, as part of our new strategic plan, we'll want to look at more useful measures like growth, like literacy, you know, looking at what are the best measures about children reading. And as James Etta mentioned, just also knowing, even though it's old news, I think it's important to see how our children do after they graduate. Did they stay in college and or did they get a job with a living wage? So those would be things to strive for.
All right, so growth is definitely the way to go. Minimal proficiency standards are just that, they're minimal, and they are relatively arbitrary, and the state has redefined those at least twice during my 8-year tenure on the board. So I think we definitely do have to look at growth. The problem is that the state doesn't give us that data. We have to have Diane Vilwalk spend a tremendous amount of time and effort to be able to get that data. There are some limitations to the data because there's an error of measurement when you give the end of grade tests, and we don't want to give, you know, all day tests to measure this. We give, you know, 50 item tests or whatever it is, and that has a standard error. So the expected growth, at least 50% of students should meet expected growth, and that's the state average. In our district, it's right around 60%, which is the highest, among the highest, if not the highest in the state. But teachers do look at individual students. They are focused on that every day. Could they do better? Of course. I think they all recognize that and are looking for tools to be able to help them do that.
Thank you. The fourth question will be posed by a representative of the PTA, and it will go first to Ms. Streeter, then Mr. Kelly, and then Ms. Castellano for 2-minute answers in that order, or something like that. And then, and then 1-minute answers from Ms. Burrows, Ms. Bedford, and Mr. Barrett.
I'll just give a blanket apology for any future oops. But in response to this question, I will say that organizations. But I haven't asked it yet.
Sorry.
We're just like ready to go. All right, you can ask a question.
But wait, I have a small announcement. After this round, the index cards with questions will be collected. So if you have one to hand in, there's a receptacle at the back. Hi. Over the past few years, the board has developed policies around bullying and honors hybrid classes, among many others. We know from the news over the last few months that the implementations of these policies in particular have fallen somewhat short of the goals for them. And in fact, it has come to light that some of the policies may have been seen more as a suggested course of action than as a requirement set by the board. Do you agree that communication and faithfulness in implementation of board policy decisions are areas of possible improvement? And if so, what will you seek to change in the future?
I think I'm ready. All righty. For an organization as strict, there will always be challenges. We will always have challenges and even setbacks with communication. But it's really about establishing systems that provide channels of communication that are effective. The system should allow us to articulate to all staff, especially our building leaders, what is expected of them. One of the things that I think all of us have to keep in mind is that as a board, we develop and establish policy, and it is up to district leaders and administrators to implement those policies. Many of them start out as mandates from the federal government or the General Assembly, and it is our responsibility as board members to create a policy that fits for our district. But in terms of communication, I will always support efforts that require stakeholders to have the opportunity to hear about any proposals that could impact their students and staff. I'll also continue to support efforts that allow building leaders be sent these communiques when policies and directions are either changed or established that they're going to be responsible for implementing. I think those two pieces are very key, and it's really all about communication, and I know you've heard that word several times already tonight, but it truly is, and that communication has to be monitored. We as a board are also responsible for monitoring programs and services and how we're doing as a district, but we do rely on our district administrators to monitor the implementation of whatever practices are mandated by a policy that we approve. When we do have, thank you.
So I heard two, it's my favorite number tonight, different concepts in this question. One is good governance and setting policy, and the second is implementing that policy. So we've already had some discussion tonight about the processes that the board uses in order to collect input from the community when making decisions. I think it's very important that, because this is a public institution funded by the public, that the processes be followed in a way which allows input from all stakeholders who are involved. The board is trying to be more reaching out to those constituencies which do not have quite as vocal mouthpieces, and to try to get input from the community, which are parts of the community which are not necessarily heard from traditionally. But on the implementation side, the board has limitations in what it can and should do. We hire a superintendent to run the school system, and as Liz Carter, hi Liz, was always fond of saying, that he's our only employee. And so we hold him responsible for the appropriate implementation of policies, and the board needs to be very clear in what it is we expect as a community and what we're going to demand in terms of reporting, because every time we ask for a report or data, that creates a burden as well as information. So I think we have to make a very clear communication with the superintendent in terms of what it is that we want to accomplish, and that if that is not done, that there are consequences, and we hold the superintendent responsible for those lack of implementation if that's what's happening. Thank you.
The thing I think that's important to say right off the bat is that we all need to recognize that we're all working together. We need to not work against each other. We need to all work with each other, and I think we all need to start on that premise. Respect breeds respect. There's a lot that goes into developing policies. A lot of people are involved. For example, on the 5 district priorities that are currently adopted by the board, there are district committees going on right now that are discussing, reviewing, gathering data, gathering input. People take a lot of time to get to the point of developing a policy. There's also the avenue of the SIT that is also utilized in addition to the committees. So we need to respect those people's times and those people's expertise, because they're trying to bring the leaders to the table in that area of expertise in order to develop best policies so that we can use best practices. So again, then the effective communication comes on board. So once a policy is made, we've gotten to that point that's taken a lot of work to get to, that needs to be effectively communicated to all the stakeholders. And like Mike said, Dr. Frisella is our employee, and he has many employees underneath him. On the district webpage outlines the hierarchy of who reports to who. So making sure that all those lines are tied together tightly is important. Otherwise, it's not going to trickle down to the teachers, to the ones who have to implement that policy. And if they're not hearing the same message, it's like the game telephone. Which we're all familiar with. When it trickles on down the line, sometimes the same message isn't heard. So effective communication is very important. And then holding that communication once it's received, holding those stakeholders accountable is also important in order for all of us to be working off the same blueprint. Thank you.
So I think the 2-minute answers have really covered this thoroughly. I'll just say that I have learned over my time on the school board that, yes, indeed, we have uneven implementation of policies in our district, and most of our kids doesn't actually affect them very much. But I would venture to say that many of the people in this room have had a child on the wrong side of the implementation gap, and there's been frustration, and that's created activism. And so it's critically important, and again, the board's most important role is to hold our top staff people accountable for keeping that from happening any further.
Double checking. Okay, I'm next. Dr. Frisella, would you stand up and say hi to everybody? There he is. I just wanted everyone to know that he is here. I agree with the prior speakers. I started to make a list of all the really critical policies that have not been implemented consistently at schools, from PLCs to the weather policy to having IEPs and 504s in teachers' hands, to curriculum alignment, to teacher recommendations. When we abolished, a prior board over 10 years ago abolished that, it is a fundamental core problem, and administrative oversight is what's needed to correct it. It was definitely a critical piece in the superintendent search. We heard it loud and clear from all constituencies, teachers, parents, and the community. And I think just the beginning of these walkthroughs that are happening now in a different vein will set the right standard and message. Thank you.
I think the biggest factor in this, and Ms. Streeter talked about it a couple of times, and that is the leadership in the building. I don't think we can stress enough the importance of having a strong leader who is communicating. I mean, we talked about communication is important, but it only happens if that leader in the principal's office is really leading. And that means leading the teachers in doing what we expect them to do. I would also add a bit of a counterbalance to what the board has said so far, and that's that we should continue to be open to experimentation, and we should. I mean, it should be within structure, and it should be communicated both ways, and we should all know about what's happening so that parents have the right expectations as well. But we need to be open to trying new and different things, and you know, maybe they're pilots or maybe there's something different. But we want our kids to be creative. We need to be creative as a board as well.
Thank you. And if there's anyone who still has a question on an index card, if you just lift them so one of the volunteers can come get them during this question, which will come from the representative of the NAACP. And we'll go first to Ms. Castellano, then Mr. Barrett, and Mr. Kelly for 2-minute answers, followed by Ms. Bedford, Ms. Streeter, and Ms. Burrows.
Hit me.
Good evening, and thanks for coming. My name is James Farah. I'm the parent of a 6th grader at Colbert Middle School. I'm also the vice president of the NAACP Chapel Hill Carborough branch, and I'd like to take a moment to thank Paige and Emily, the PTA, and the NAACP for collaborating together on this event. Specifically, what types of support, monitoring of best practices, gathering of efficient data, and following through are you aware of in other communities throughout the nation that are producing positive academic results for young African American and Hispanic students? And how can our school better partner with those communities to create and provide an effective support network for students?
Thank you. I think that that you raised an excellent question. I think now would be a great time to say, do I have a specific answer? No, I don't. Do I know specific data on specific schools that we could emulate to produce? No, I don't. But do I know how to find those answers? Yes, I do. And plenty of people are sitting in this room right now who I would go to reach out my hand and ask for support and ideas, because that's where it starts. We all need to gather data and gather ideas. you know, in our community, we need to get support in our community first. You know, who's living next door, who's my teacher, who's my social worker, who's my principal, who's my mentor, who's going to support me through school. And identifying that person to help is going to be crucial for these kids. I can give one example currently in our district that is showing success for African American and Hispanic students, and that's the dual language program. If you look at the data at Carver Elementary School and you look at the minority, the African American and Hispanic test scores, you know, it's early data, but dual language is not something that's new in this country. It's proven effectiveness. It takes into account some cultural diverse appreciation, but those kids are making the grade. So I would say that we need to explore that as an option for our African American and Hispanic students, just looking right at our back door right here. Thank you.
I love the idea of looking at our back door, because I have a friend of mine who teaches at McDougall Elementary, and she has a peer of hers that she's described as, over the past year, decided it was maybe a second-year teacher, decided she was going to make it her mission to solve the achievement gap in her classroom. And my understanding is she was successful, but it took 80 hours a week from her. It took a lot of late-night meetings with parents because that was when they were available. It took a tremendous amount of work. It's not a sustainable, it's not an extendable model, but are we having a conversation with her to find out what did work? What worked in our community? It's not based on research in other communities that don't look like ours, but we have an example of something that did work and used across the district. I've heard stories of teachers that have really good ideas for how to address things, and they are, if they speak up at a meeting where particularly a Lincoln Center staff person is there, they get told that they shouldn't do that because it's going counter to what the board has said as policy. I think we need to encourage those ideas. I think we need to encourage ideas sharing between teachers. I know that nobody has extra time, certainly, to go to meetings, but there are ways through technology, even a wiki, if anybody knows what that means, would allow teachers to input an idea that they've got that's shared and can be used, and then we should recognize the teachers that are sharing the good ideas and are being used by all sorts of teachers. So I think we have the ability to recognize teachers for what they do and the good ideas that they have, and we need to take advantage of that.
All right, so you're switching over. Thanks. So there are different ways to look at the educational information that's out there. There have been several reports that have looked through all the school systems in the nation to look and see which ones are most effective. That have the smallest difference in terms of mean scores between groups of minorities and the majority populations. The problem with looking at that type of data is that the schools are doing many different things and they can't necessarily identify what's effective. So I think that a better approach is to look at studies that have been done. Most of the educational studies that have been done do not create high-level evidence because they're anecdotal, they're small series, this is my experience. So you have to look to higher-level evidence. And there is a program, which I've talked about since before I was on the board, which is called the Knowledge is Power Program, KIP. And since I started talking about that program, there's a great study that was done because there was a pseudo-randomization of students that were selected by lottery to be enrolled in this school in this state, and those who weren't and went to the local public schools system. And there was a huge difference in terms of the efficacy between them. And when you look at the characteristics of the KIP program, it has a lot of the characteristics that Jim just mentioned, that the teacher spent a tremendous amount of time with students. And that, to me, is the solution for students who aren't starting at a position where they're going to ever be able to catch up, even if you have the most effective instructional techniques. So we need to invest more time. There is a network that the district is a founding member to called the Minority Student Achievement Network. It is a network that allows us to gather information from other similar districts across the nation and share information, and I've run out of time. But not ideas.
Okay. All right. We recently partnered with the UNC School of Social Work on a 3-year look at elementary students and whether certain teaching strategies and interventions worked. And her name is Dr. Natasha something, was one of the co-authors. There she is. Hi. And she reminds us that there is a KIPP middle school in the northeastern part of the state that we should visit and learn from. We have yet to take that field trip. We have a few charters like Harlem Academy where comprehensive services are offered, mental health, medical, all kinds of literacy, all kinds of comprehensive services. That's something that we have the buildings, they're taxpayer supported, it's something we could look at. And Arlington, Virginia is a school that's part of the MSAN network that we belong to that has had some good achievement with parent interventionists at their schools who work with parents to improve attendance and learning. And my time is up.
1 minute is not enough time to get into a really thorough response to this, but some strategies have already been shared. What we're currently doing, we are part of the Minority Student Achievement Network. We have administrators who are part of very focused teams that get together and talk about and discuss best practices and share that information and collect data so that there is data available to other sister schools, if you will, to use that information to help them to determine what best practices to use. I think an increased collaboration with our community leaders so that students can engage with leaders who look like them and that history can be shared. I also think that more time should be spent on instruction and that teachers have to reduce the urge to consider factors that are outside of the school classroom as a predictor of a child's success.
So what I'd like to add, people have mentioned bunches of different things, and for those of you who've been around for a while, you may have at some point looked at our Minority Student Achievement Plan, and if I remember correctly, there are over 100 things on the plan. And so what I would like the district to do is, and this actually happens through a lot of areas in the district, we try to do everything. And so one of the things I think is real important is let's pick a few things and do them really well. I know that we're really, I think as a board, really focused on improving instruction, improving literacy, but let's try to focus and do things really well as opposed to scattering our efforts and maybe not getting the results that we had hoped.
Thank you. And following this question, we will have a break for exactly 5 minutes. Were there any cards left, or just raise them high? And all right. This final question in this round will come from a representative of Page and goes first to Mr. Kelly, then Ms. Burrows and Mr. Barrett for 2-minute answers, followed by Ms. Streeter, Ms. Castellano, and Ms. Bedford for 1-minute answers.
Good evening. My name is Xiaopei Huang. I am the mother of 2 children in the school district. I work as a cancer researcher at Duke University Medical Center. So my question for the panel is this. Investment capital and over the past decade, jobs have increasingly flowed to where the best and most cost-effective skills reside, wherever in the world the knowledge workers may be. What will you do to enable our students to effectively compete in the global marketplace? And what changes will you make to increase the STEM skills, which is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and math, creativity, and innovation? And how will you overcome the inherent and systemic challenges that may prevent these necessary changes from being implemented right away to make an impact on our future workforce and economic prosperity?
Thanks. So I go first. I think this question is directed towards the global achievement gap that I think has become recognized on our board. We first of all want to try to remove any artificial barriers to achievement. We're going to be seeing a common core curriculum across the nation, essentially. It won't be directly comparable to other countries, but it is something that I think will help us be able to compare at least across the nation. And some of the local artificial barriers that I think have become identified recently are local prerequisites for courses which don't have clear rationales and vary from what the state requires as prerequisites. I think we want to provide students with multiple options, and that includes programs such as the middle college high school. We want to allow for acceleration, access to the North Carolina Virtual Public Schools system, in particular for students who want to try to accelerate. Oftentimes, students are using that to accelerate in STEM areas, but not necessarily only in STEM areas. I think we should consider a elementary number 11, which is hopefully coming in 2013, but at least by 2014, 2014, as a STEM magnet school perhaps. And we have high school academies in some areas, but not in a STEM area, so that might be an area of focus. I think we also need to look at our world language program, because to be a global competitor, you have to be able to communicate globally. That is a priority for the board this coming year. And I think those are the major areas of focus. But one other comment I will make is that this doesn't happen by putting everyone into a STEM program. You need to have a society which can support knowledge workers, and that requires expertise in many different areas. So every child counts to make a STEM strong program.
So in fact, I think Mike really has covered that one very well, particularly with his last point, which I'm pleased about. And I was glad he would go first because I knew he would. So I'll just say more globally, what we're about is teaching children to think, and also to learn how to learn, because so much of what we're dealing with in our era is that things are changing so quickly, as we all know. Who knew that Twitter would be a campaign device 2 years ago, or those kinds of things? That's a very small example. So the main thing is that our children need to go out in the world and know how to teach themselves or get the instruction they need to learn new things. So again, that for us, that comes back to our instruction and making sure that our students are learning not just to repeat back facts or do formulas that they don't understand why, but to raise that level up to teach them to think.
So I am JCBARR on Twitter. Thanks, Mia, for that opening. I actually think this question, I look at it a little differently, because Aaron Nelson, the Chamber of Commerce here in Chapel Hill, likes to describe our biggest export in Chapel Hill is well-educated children. Right? We actually do a pretty good job when you compare to other areas, so much so that we can't have enough jobs here in Chapel Hill to keep all these kids here. So I think it's an area that we do okay in. I think one of the things that we need to do, if we believe this is a priority for us, is we need to make sure it's reflected in our budget that way. I don't think our budget process is very transparent, and it doesn't appear, because we can't really tell, but it doesn't appear to align very well to our priorities. We talk about areas to cut, and we look at them in terms of our priorities, but we never really look from the ground up at what we're spending money on, and are we focusing on things that we believe in, such as STEM. Certainly reflected in the fact that we've changed how we do elementary science education and eliminated those positions. And I also think that we as a board need to make sure that we're very open to using things like position swaps, if we've not made this a budget priority, where a particular school feels very strongly about this. The FPG example, where they believe they've got a very strong program in science that is doing a lot of really good things for their students and their population, we need to be responsive to as a board and make sure that continues to be supported.
I think it's my turn. In 1 minute or less. With budget limitations, I think this is an area where we have been challenged. While we've seen other school districts do very well in creating more opportunities in STEM and getting more kids interested in STEM, for us, it's really going to be about increasing our partnerships with the businesses and manufacturers that are in our region. We have wonderful opportunities to engage with them, and that can also support us financially by getting those students hopefully into programs that are learn and earn opportunities for them. More collaboration with the universities. 3 major universities in the area that have strong programs. They have programs for students, but everyone doesn't know about these programs. So I think it's really up to us to share that information, because what used to be extra and enrichment for an elite group of families is now becoming the basic education requirements. So that information has to be accessible to everyone. Thank you.
Well, I think we all know the saying, it takes a village. We have a great village right here to take full advantage of. We have great local resources to utilize to help with these global skills. You know, we have VIF, we have UNC, we have Duke. There's plenty of resources to tap into. So it's making those connections with the people that will foster those inroads to make that happen. One article I recently read, 64% of the jobs that our children are going to enter into aren't even created yet. So what does that tell us? We have a lot of creative learning to do. 38% aren't even going to use their college major for their profession. So we need to be critical thinkers. We need to be able to think out of the box. Project-based learning is something that can be looked at and utilized more in our classrooms for every child. Not just for the gifted or nurturing, and it's something that we can bring to every child. And I'm done. Okay.
To make our children more globally competitive, I do think we need to really focus on dual language expansion, but also for those families that aren't interested or in schools where it doesn't really work, to rethink our FLES program and foreign languages there. I agree with what Mike said. I think a good example, though, of our partnership is the Public School Foundation is spending $40,000 this year to pay 2 teachers at every elementary school to be sort of the coach in smart boards, so that the technology that we've already invested in is used and shared with the lessons, so that we use technology to improve instruction and not just as a tool or a, you know, I haven't seen the payback yet in some of this technology. And if anything, it's making them more attention deficit. So we've got to use it in a smarter way and a better way. I think the virtual public school is another example of where we can use state resources to improve our competitiveness, but we need to integrate curriculum so that the arts and the sciences, and we've talked about that for 19 years.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, and after a break of exactly 5 minutes, we will return with some of the questions that you have submitted by index card. Thank you.
Now the fun begins.
We received some feedback that it might be helpful to talk about the board seats that are open this year, because the election is a little different this year than it has been in the past. There is one 2-year seat open, and James Etta Bedford is running unopposed for that seat.
Thank you.
So you get 1 vote for that seat. I wonder who you're going to cast that vote for. And then in addition to that, there are 4 4-year seats open, and you will get 4 votes for those other 4-year seats. So we hope that clarifies things for everyone. And now we'll turn it back over to Dr. Hildebrand.
And early voting.
Oh, yes, sorry. Early voting. Early voting is very helpful to everyone because the more people vote early, the shorter the lines are on election day. So if you can vote early, you'll be helping a lot of people who might be rushing over on their lunch hour or before work. There is information about early voting on the back table, and it begins October 20th.
Thank you, Emily. The representatives of the organizations have been working furiously in the back, going through the index cards, trying to select some questions that we will now present to the candidates. The first question will be posed by someone who has wanted to present it herself. The format will be each candidate will have 1 minute to answer these questions, and for the first question, which will be coming soon, it will be Bedford, Castellanos, Streeter, Barrett, Burrows, and Kelly. Right. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Beth Breaker. I'm a teacher at Carrboro High School. My question today relates to the new state criteria on which teachers are evaluated. Last fall, we adopted the 2011 new state criteria for teacher evaluation, in which teacher leadership is the #1 standard on which we are currently evaluated. Our question is, given that teacher leadership and distinguished teachers being described as those who are actively participating in and advocating for decision-making structures that work for students, how can teachers be included in these really urgent decision-making processes of our school district? Do you feel as if we have systems in which that input is currently solicited and valued? And what are your thoughts about seeking and honoring teachers' expertise, specifically if that is how we are evaluated as professionals? Thank you.
Ready? Right now, we have limited processes for teachers to participate. Those include a district curriculum committee where coursework can be evaluated and presented for change and update or even to be eliminated. We have our PLCs where teachers may work as a group and can certainly always bring suggestions to their principal and to their school improvement team, as well as to district committees. As far as the evaluation instrument, it was new last year, and this is year 2. We just tweaked it a little bit. And in looking for leadership and changes, we're always eager to have those. They need to follow that chain of command and be brought to the superintendent, because it would be the superintendent who would bring any policy changes to the board, presenting that evidence, getting public input, and we'd be looking for data as well, and not just anecdotal evidence. Certainly we want to rely on what teachers see in the classroom. They are the most immediate there with the students, and use that good judgment.
Thank you. What James Etta said speaks to me as well. Being involved on different committees where you can share your input and your personal experiences in your classroom, getting best proven practices brought forward and stated versus theories for ideas for practices, but in an avenue where all the leaders can come together to collaborate. The SITs, I still think, are an important venue. In every SIT I've been on, people aren't knocking at the doors to come get involved, and I really wish they would, because the SIT is a great avenue for teachers, parents, and administrators to come together and have thoughtful and engaging dialogue on what's specifically going on in their school. So I think that's a good way to be a leader in the school and then share across the district as well.
I think it's me. It's certainly not a perfect situation, but I do believe that the new teacher evaluation tool will help to improve instruction for our students, and that is really the ultimate goal. In terms of teachers being able to demonstrate their leadership capabilities. One is by way of participation in district-level committees that that need their input in terms of curriculum development and course development, their work at the school level with their PLCs, engaging and collaborating with their fellow teachers on what's best for children in terms of teaching practices as well as the tools that are used to assess their achievement. Another demonstration of leadership at the school level is obviously by way of being chair or assistant chair of a department, but also in creating a platform by which students can engage throughout the school in a number of ways, but provide that leadership and engagement in an objective way so that students can make a thoughtful decision for themselves. Thank you.
What I heard you ask was about providing input into district policies, and I think the school improvement teams is an important avenue for that. I think often we view them as parent groups, but they're really supposed to be a joint group. In my opinion, school improvement teams that come to board meetings and provide feedback to the board. Certainly teachers are often welcome as public at the board meetings, but again, that process is sort of broken in terms of how the school board provides feedback and how that's working. Which is why, I'll say per previous answer, I think committee kind of structure where you can have more two-way back and forth with all the interested stakeholders, certainly including all the teachers that are interested to be involved, is very appropriate.
There's a range of things, and Lord knows we haven't done perfect communication in the past, and we can always get better. We can always get better on just about everything that we do. As James and others have said, the school improvement teams, that's part of why they're there, to provide an avenue of communication. We actually have a slot on every single board agenda where a school improvement team, if they've come and agreed on something as a group, are welcome to present, and of course send emails as a group when they've come and agreed on it. I also note that there are multiple standards on the teacher evaluation. And having talked to some people who've looked through it, and in fact, I was on this district committee that looked at rolling out the new evaluation. And as a matter of fact, I just can't resist saying, but James's mother was on that committee with me, as a matter of fact. So anyway, the point is, we've noted, there are numerous things, and we just have to be clear about what those opportunities are.
All right, so there are opportunities, I believe, for teachers to show leadership and to provide input into policy development. That includes the Curriculum Management Committee, which is composed mostly of teachers. There are no parents other than perhaps one school board member on that committee. There are professional learning communities that are composed of teachers, and there can be a leader within those departments. The SITs have been mentioned. You can also talk directly to your principal. You can talk to the Lincoln Center curricular area and supervisors, and there's the teacher organizations, and they oftentimes have provided input to the board. And if you have another idea, or a group of you have another idea, please share it with us. I would say that it's important to follow process. There was one teacher one year who was convinced that the best approach was to have single-sex classrooms, and tried it in our district without any discussion with anyone else. And I don't think that just because someone is convinced that that is the sufficient justification to implement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Breaker. We really do appreciate the work that teachers are doing on the front lines of this struggle, and for you to be here to participate is also very much appreciated. I will now ask some questions that have come, and bear with me as I get through these, and I apologize in advance. These are, we have 1 minute to answer these, and I know all of these. You could spend much more time than that, so please bear with us and try to get through these. The first question I'm going to read will go to Burroughs, then Streeter, then Bedford, then Kelly, then Barrett, then Castellano. The question is, what would you make a priority within these multiple alternative paths? And you might want to take some notes on this. What would you make a priority within these multiple alternative paths? And the paths are: 1, magnet schools, wraparound, schools within schools, the trades, gifted nurturing, middle college, CTE, career exploration. I'll repeat those: 1, magnet schools, wraparound, schools within schools, the trades, gifted nurturing, middle college, and CTE, career exploration. What would you make a priority within these multiple alternatives paths? And how do you rate our district's performance in STEM education? If you can do that in a minute.
Actually, I can. With all due respect to the composer of that question, it's a trick question. These are all important paths, and we need to do them well. We have such a diverse district, so many different needs, that we can't not do any of those things or say that one's more important or the other. I am not going to play the game with that question. I'm just going to say no. We have to do it all. Our kids have too many needs, and I still have half a second. And so if you repeat the second piece.
How do you rate our district's performance in STEM education?
How do I rate it? I'm sorry I asked for the second one. No.
Go back to the first.
We'll hand this one to Mike. No. Obviously, again, I'm going to go with a global answer here. We have a very, very good school district, but it will not be excellent until all children have access. And some people will think that's a broad answer, but it is the darn truth.
Streeter.
Thank you.
Starting to panic there. The district has done, I think, fairly well in providing opportunities in these areas. There is still more work to be done. I think one of the challenges that we have is being able to offer it to as many students who seek it. While we don't want to restrict students and limit students from the opportunity and give others an advantage in having the opportunity, we still have to be able to try to implement and provide some offerings to as many districts or as many schools as possible. In terms of the second question, we can do better, but I know that we do have some very good teachers in our district who are very provocative in how they're engaging students in those 4 subject areas. They're collaborating with other teachers in the other specialties and teaching core instruction while being able to apply that knowledge in real situations for the children. So some of that is happening. How consistent is really hard to determine, but I know it is happening.
Okay. As far as the paths, we do have an opportunity with Elementary 11 because of its location to consider a magnet, a walk zone in a magnet, and we'll be having that discussion. I will say that we considered a school within a school with Carborough High School and Gates money. It's too limiting. You have to literally block off the library. You can't share your resources, and we said no, never mind. Middle college, I think it was a mistake. It serves some good children, but we really need to go to early college. Or when the Northern Orange Durham Tech campus is ready, when it's built a little bit, has bigger facilities, if we can move it there because of the transportation issues, kids can't get to Durham Tech. And they don't want to leave their school after 2 years, but early college has been very successful when we look at Durham in comparison. STEM, I am always shocked. I always want to hear when we first advocated for science specialists that in this community of professionals, PhDs, researchers, that we put up with such weak science in the elementary and middle grades. We have pretty good science in the high schools, but it sure could be expanded upon and more varied.
All right, I'm not really sure what the questioner is trying to get at here. I agree with a lot of the things that James Etta just said. We might be considering a magnet for Elementary 11 because of its location. We did consider that for Rashkus when it was opening, and the community showed no interest in it at that time. I don't really know what a wraparound is. The school within a school, as was already said, we rejected. Trades, CTE, very important for a society to have people who are expert in these areas. Gifted nurturing, I think that extends across every area. So it really doesn't, it's not really exclusive with any of these areas. Middle college, I have a little bit different view than James Zetta said, in that I think for the students who have gone there, that is a good option for them. And I think a lot of them have felt that as well. It does have limitations. It's been tremendously underutilized. Many fewer children have taken the opportunity to jump on there. How do we do on STEM? Next time.
I'll pick up on what Mike said about middle college. I just recently learned about it, and I think it's a great program for the kids that can get there. Certainly it has its challenges, and I think we need to address that. We also need to publicize it better. But the kids that are in the program are kids that aren't being served in other ways in our traditional classrooms. And so we need to encourage that and continue to do more of that. On the question of STEM, Mike brought up a lot of really good points. I would just use an example. We have a lot of great resources in this community. I know my daughter last year in her 3rd grade class had a professor from Duke come in and do chemistry experiments for the kids, and they just loved it. I mean, you could not imagine any, just the cool stuff that you see. Yeah, you can see it on TV, but to see it in the classroom was just really exciting for them. And we need to take advantage of those resources and make sure they're available to all kids.
Okay, priority with these paths. So again, same as everybody else, different things offer different things to different people. We have very different learners in our community. It's our job to meet every student's needs. And some of these program offerings will meet the needs of some kids better than others. So I'm glad that we offer them. I'm glad we offer a diversity of them. School within a school, the one thing I'd say about that I do want to comment on is I think it makes it very challenging when you have a school within a school to do PLC work. It's hard for the teachers to collaborate. It's hard to get best practices going. So I'd say that of those, that would be one of the challenges. We do have one in the district, sort of already. So as far as STEM goes, I don't know if anybody else recently read this, but on the chopping block is NSF funding. So that's disappointing. I think we can do better with science in our classroom as well, and there are great things that are going on. So, no, I'm not. Okay.
Thank you. The next question goes to Barrett, Bedford, excuse me, Burrows, Castellano, Kelly, and Streeter in that order. And again, just 1 minute. This is a rigorous question. Given the harsh realities of the current financial budget climate, what are your top budget priorities? Please name 3 programs you would never cut and 3 programs you would be willing to cut.
Rigorous question, and I don't think I have all the answers here. I think this is the budget priorities need to be set by the community after a lot of discussions. And I think, as I said before, it goes back to our process in a lot of ways. We do not have a good process to build from the ground up. And actually, since I have a little time here, I'll use it. Chapel Hill, I learned last night at the 2020 visioning session, is changing how they do budgeting. And the town manager told me afterwards, he said he's offered to Dr. Forcella some technical assistance in how to do that. And I think that's great for the town, and I think it's great for our schools as well. How do we build our budget to match our community priorities, what's most effective for all of our kids from the ground up? That'll make the conversations a lot easier because you won't be pitting groups against each other. I think our school district has done a really good job of pitting groups against each other in the past, and that's not the way I would approach this question.
Okay, I would never cut the arts and PE and electives. I think they're essential curriculum matters. I would not cut the academies at the high school. They cost us only a little bit of money. I would not cut dual language. Even though they also cost just a little bit of money, they save us money in other areas. And a 4th one, I would not put our assistant principals reduce them from 12 months to 10, like Orange County Schools had to do. 3 things I would cut. If I had to cut, I'd cut the half-time AG specialists at each elementary, leaving 1. I would cut 1 of the literacy coaches, leaving at least 1. and I would cut FLES and replace it with something that was more effective.
Can you tell she's not opposed?
Everyone should speak the truth.
You should, absolutely. But I think I will go with Mr. Barrett's method of truth. And in fact, he is absolutely right. I think, again, I keep harping back on the fact that we're going to be doing a new strategic plan. I think that will help us, with our priorities and thinking about. And I do think, ground up budgeting, it makes sense, especially in a time where we're starting fresh. We have new leadership. There'll be a slightly new board, maybe really new board, hard to know. But anyway, the point is we need to take a fresh look and also try to get the good evaluation on programs. We do too much with anecdotal evidence, and so I think that that will be a key piece of it as well.
Okay. One thing that I think is important to mention is sharing resources. I think that that's something that's been touched on. So in talking about budget cuts, it'd be nice not to have to make budget cuts. So what can we do to think out of the box so that maybe we don't have to make those hard decisions? Sharing resources with Parks and Rec, our town of Carrboro, town of Chapel Hill, to make efficiencies when we're bargaining for different things in our community that we all utilize. So I think we need to think out of the box so maybe we don't have to go to those extremes. Never cut. I think languages are important. How we deliver those languages, we're working on as an educational community to offer recommendations for that. I think asking the people who are on the ground, the teachers, the parents in the classroom, our administrators, everybody knows in their household things that they'd cut. So I think asking the people that are on the ground doing the work what they think would be important cuts to make are first and foremost.
I think I'm next, is that
yes.
Right? Thank you. So first of all, I just note that the budget has been declining for the last approximately 4 years and is expected to continue to decline, and that you cannot continue that pattern without adversely affecting the educational program. And so please note my lapel button supporting the quarter-cent sales tax. There is a limit, and we've reached it, I think. We've already reduced positions. We've shifted a lot of funding out of capital improvements, and our capital structures are going to start to decline. I think that we do, in the budget development process in the past, we didn't use a zero budget approach. I think we have to do that. That means everything's on the table. And I also think that as we go through our priorities this year, there will be 2 items in particular which will be under review. That is the FLES program, because we're going to be looking at world languages, and also the elementary literacy support positions, because we're looking at our literacy program. I'm not saying that those are going to cut. I'm just saying that that's going to be part of the priorities for this year.
I'm last, right?
I think so.
All righty. Before I would consider cuts or keeps, I think it's critical that we all understand that good governance means that you look at the issue and you look at it from all sides. And that means you have to include feedback and issues and concerns from stakeholders, everyone who will be impacted by the decision. Even if you don't think so, you also need to inform yourself. As a board member, we receive information all the time, so that means you need to look at that information before making a consideration or considering how you will decide on an issue or a budget issue. I do think that strategies and procedures and processes that are in place to improve the health of children should not be cut, because that is a factor that can impact how well they learn. So school nurses, physical education, and child nutrition need to be kept as optimum as possible.
All right, thank you. The next question is, it goes in this order to Kelly, Burrows, Barrett, Streeter, Castellano, and Bedford. It's a lengthy question, so you may have to focus in on the part that you think most clearly expresses your view about the subject as a whole, most substantively does. But listen as read this. For many years, our district has been committed to a policy of using in-class differentiation as the primary tool for meeting the diverse learning needs of our students, which can range from 3 through 6 grade levels in a single classroom. Do you differentiation by itself a sufficient tool to meet these widely varied learning needs? If not, what would you add? If you do consider differentiation sufficient, please grade A through F the job we are currently doing in the district at implementing differentiation in our classrooms. What, in addition to move teacher training and differentiation, would you recommend we add to our toolkit to improve our ability to meet all our students' learning needs?
Okay. I don't think it's fair to only get a minute to respond to a question that takes 2 minutes to read. So first of all, differentiation was never designed to be the only strategy that we use for delivering instruction to all students. There are many other aspects of that, and one of the most important ones is clustering of students. Clustering of students, the students who are in a classroom that are being taught by one student have to be within a certain range of their current abilities, and I'm not sure that we do a very good job on that, but I don't have really good data to show that that's the case. There's about a third of students from grade 3 and up to 4 and up who are identified as gifted, and we allow the clusters to be about a third, so we really don't do much clustering. And I can't really remember the rest of the question.
Okay, I'll let them reset. So I think Mike nailed it. It's not the only. Differentiation is one of many strategies that are used. I think it varies in the quality. I will say, having had one children graduate from the district and one child who's well on her way, who've experienced in-class differentiation. And in fact, I've seen, I believe, having been a classroom volunteer, I've seen it done very, very well. The key would probably be, or not probably, will be, and has been, good professional development, and an excellent teacher who has a good, strong toolkit will be more equipped to do this, not just within what we know about differentiation, but also just they'll be able to spread out what they know to do. So.
No, I don't think it's sufficient. I think, in addition, we have not implemented it very well. I was surprised that Ms. Bedford didn't include it on our list of things that we've, over time, done really poorly and consistently, because that's absolutely the case with differentiation. But I don't think it's by itself sufficient. I think clustering is certainly one thing we need to do, but we also need to do that very flexibly. If we're going to really grow each and every kid, you can't put one label on them that they're going to live with them forever. They need to be addressed as individuals and pushed as individuals and have the highest expectations for each and every one of those individuals. And yes, that's hard. And we're asking a lot of teachers to do that. And one of the ways, clustering certainly is one of the ways, we hopefully make that a little easier for the teachers, but it's really important that we do address each and every kid as an individual.
I think the critical piece to this type of strategy being used in instruction is the teacher. The teacher has to be developed and has to be high quality and feel comfortable differentiating in the classroom. If that's not there, then there's really no way that it's going to happen. We've not been able to monitor how well that happens in the district. I am interested in having discussions around how we do that, but we certainly can't roll out differentiation throughout a grade level or a section without supporting our teachers. So some efforts have been made, but I think that it needs to be even more authentic and with fidelity to make sure that they know how to do it and feel comfortable. their collaboration with their fellow teachers is a key to that as well. So, and that means PLC work and making sure that it's as good as it can be. So,
thank you.
The differentiation in the classroom, personally as a parent, I've seen it work great and I've seen it work horribly. I've seen both ends of the spectrum. My kids have experienced it. I think the teachers that do it well obviously have had effective professional development. A lot of our newer teachers coming right out of school have been most recent with that education. But we need to give the time to develop that professional development, to teach the teachers how to do differentiation well. I think clustering is difficult. As you said, the range of learners in our classroom, think about when you enter kindergarten, the range of ages of the kids. Some parents choose to put their kids in early, some parents choose to put them in later, and that's a personal choice, but that also leads to the gaps in the classroom that carry on up both with socially and academically. PLCs, hugely important, and to decide if we're doing differentiation well or we're providing instruction well in a content area, we need the PLCs to be effective, and I'll just continue my conversation later.
All right. Differentiation is a wonderful romantic vision. Some teachers are remarkable master teachers and they do it extremely well. I honestly don't know if they've gathered it through experience, through their collegiality, or through professional development. We emphasized this over 10 years ago. We had one day last August. It's been just not taught. We haven't had the professional development. So I feel we can't make judgments when we haven't evaluated and we haven't provided professional development. We haven't held teachers responsible for implementing it. It varies by grade level. When you go into the elementary schools, you will see much more differentiation than you will ever see at the high school level or at the middle school level. We don't give gifted teachers to the high school. We've never funded that. We have 1.5 positions at each elementary, 1 at middle school. So the board, as far as that priority at high schools, we just haven't done it. So it's difficult. I would say it's a D-, and I'm probably being generous.
Thank you all for going to the heart of that question. We didn't make it easy for you. The next question goes to Castellano, Barrett, Kelly, Bedford, Streeter, and Burroughs. The question, we have SROs, school resource officers, in our middle and high schools. While some parents feel this helps to ensure the safety of their children, I believe that it may lead the other members of the staff to abdicate responsibility for discipline to the resource officer, which actually makes schools less safe. Given the recent questions raised regarding Miranda rights in an SRO interview, do you think it is appropriate to have the same individual in the lunch hall asking students to be quiet, also informing them that they have the right to remain silent? Are we creating welcoming communities in our schools if the individual that may most frequently contact a family is a peace officer and not a teacher? Is that the message we intend to send?
Wow. I think school resource officers are important in our schools. I'll just say that. I think they provide more than just somebody who's a disciplinarian. They provide a role model for our students. As far as discipline goes, I would hope that that's starting way down in elementary school. And again, respect breeds respect. If our teachers and our community members and our fellow students are being respectful to one another, we're learning that from preschool on up. So if we're learning those behaviors and modeling those behaviors as teachers and as adults, that's what we want our children to also model, so that it doesn't get to the problems later that have been coming forward. The other thing with discipline is it's important to identify no child wants to be mean. No child wants to create a problem. There's a reason. It's our job as parents and educators and administrators to find out the reason for that misbehavior and identify it before it becomes a problem that elevates to that level.
I know there's a lot of support amongst the middle school principals for this. I'm not a huge fan. I've heard too many stories beyond the ones that Dr. Hildebrandt mentioned of kids that are intimidated, particularly African American kids that have been maybe not the level of mistreatment, but certainly a level of expectation put upon them by having an interaction with a police officer when all they're doing is being kids. And all they're doing is having interactions with their kids that I'm not talking about bullying. I'm not talking about, bad things. But because that school resource officer is the one who deals with those situations, normal everyday interactions between kids, it gets escalated to a level that sets up an expectation for particularly those African American kids that they are going to interact with the police a lot. And I don't care for that. And so I understand the need at times, but I think we've got to be very careful about how we use them.
All right, I think I'm next. So I think the question really speaks to middle school. I think in high school, SROs are definitely needed and an appropriate resource to have. I think they are inappropriate for elementary school. The issue really comes up in middle school. And it is something that there have been conversations about, including at the board level. We looked recently at what the reporting structure was, what the position description was for the SRO, got feedback from the middle schools. We've heard feedback, I've heard feedback from the community, from parents, and I think this is an area that I'm willing to try under the revised definition of what the SROs do and who they report to, and what the characteristics of that position are. So these aren't employees of the district, but there are certain characteristics that I think are important that these individuals possess. And I'm willing to revise that opinion as we go forward in time. Oh, who's next?
Okay. I think the I waffle on the middle school SROs regularly. Cut them, don't cut them, cut them, don't cut them. The principals assure us that they are essential, but they should not be doing your everyday monitoring the halls discipline. That's not their point. They should be developing a relationship with each student so that when we had a suicide at Culworth many years ago, so that that never happens again. That's when we got a grant, and that's when SROs were expanded into the middle schools to try and prevent that type of death and danger. We do see an increase in actual crime at the middle school level. I don't know if it's due to the economy or the times or progression, but crime, and crimes off campus during the holidays, very severe crimes. And I think they can be more effective in questioning and investigating those serious incidences, but the school administrators should be doing the rest. And Miranda writes that should, yeah, the Supreme Court, has ruled on that, and that's correct. And they should not be profiling.
I think it's about prevention. I do know a little bit of the history of why SROs were brought into both high schools and middle schools. And I think part of that presence was to handle specific incidents around discipline, but it was also to create awareness and promote self-discipline among students, to encourage by example, by role model, by education, promote a child's ability to discipline or monitor themselves and their own behavior. There are strategies in place around character education and bullying that exist in our schools, and I think it's a good idea to have the SROs involved in that education process, but I also think that teachers need to feel supported when incidents come up. There need to be proper procedures in place, reporting procedures, and we need to acknowledge that we still continue to have a disproportionate number of minority students who are cited or accused or suspended. So procedures need to be fair as well. And I'll stop there.
The school resource officers, I actually see there's two questions. And the school resource officers, as Mike noted, we actually just recently shifted some of the wording in our policies to really emphasize the building of relationships and those kinds of things. And I think it's really, potentially very positive that the school resource officers are building positive relationships before stuff happens. I think that is a positive thing. What I want to address is the concern that staff are abdicating responsibility to the school resource officers. That's not okay. Not okay. And if a staff person or a parent thinks that that is happening, that needs to be reported up the line, because that's not appropriate. Everybody has their role, and the staff need to be participating. Now, I will say that I've not heard that before, so if that's happening somewhere, I think it's unusual, but we need to address it.
Thank you. The next part of the forum will be the lightning round. We'll ask you questions, and we'll start for the first one with Mr. Barrett and then go down the panel. And next we'll start with Ms. Bedford and go in turn. These will require simply and solely a yes or no answer. The purpose of these is merely to put you on the record concerning some issues that have been determined by the groups vetting these questions that can be answered in this kind of way. First question, and beginning with Mr. Barrett. Despite not you personally, but all of you, despite your reassurances in response to question 1 tonight regarding communication and exchange with all stakeholders, we received numerous additional questions concerning communication with all stakeholders. Will you commit to creating new channels of communication so that all stakeholders feel their viewpoints have been considered and understood? Yes or no?
Absolutely yes.
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 Yes, but I'd like to effectively use the ones we have in place, which I don't think are being used effectively.
Okay, yes or no?
Yes.
I will consider it.
Right. The next question, beginning with Ms. Bedford. Should the district implement pay to participate for extracurricular athletics?
No.
Most likely no, but that's not a yes or no question.
Again, not a yes or no question, but yes, if it meant no athletics for any of our children, I think we could figure out a way as a community to make it work.
No, with an asterisk.
No, I will not.
No. But it's a tough one.
Right. Beginning with Ms. Burrows, the question is, do you support the 1/4 cent sales tax referendum on the ballot this fall?
Yes, yes, yes.
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 Beginning with Ms. Castellano. Should the district charge students for driver's ed next year?
If that's one of the things being considered on the budget for cuts, yes.
No, we can't.
No.
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 No, most likely asterisk.
Beginning with Mr. Kelly. Do you support the merger of the Orange County school system and the Chapel Hill Carrboro City School Districts? I'm just reading the question.
No.
No.
Never.
No.
No.
Right. And the last question, beginning with Ms. Streeter. Do you support district funding for pre-K classes? Do you support district funding for pre-K classes?
Yes.
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 More.
Good. Good.
I can't believe somebody asked.
What we will do now is have your concluding statements, which will take also 1 minute. They are in this order: Streeter, Kelly, Castellano, Burrows, Bedford, and Barrett.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the organizations who sponsored this event tonight. I have appreciated and enjoyed and have been humbled by my time serving on the board for 5 years. I think I have done a very good job in being thoughtful in the decision-making process on a myriad of issues, on all issues for that matter. I will continue to advocate for procedures and directives and policies that provide opportunities for all children to learn at high levels and to achieve, opportunities for teachers to continue to develop and grow so that they may be the primary reason why our teachers and how our students achieve and grow. And I'll also continue to be judicious in how we utilize our funding for those causes. And thank you so much.
So thank you for allowing me to serve on the school board for the last 8 years. I would very much appreciate your support to continue that. We have a very important transition year this year, the first new superintendent in almost 2 decades. And I think that the experience that I bring and the focus that I have on looking to Dr. Forcella for changes, I think is something which will be very important for our district for a long time. I definitely support looking for changes from him. I expect them. I think there are a number of concerns that face our district, the budget in particular, but also trying to get the most out of the resources that we have. And I will continue to advocate for excellence for each child in the district. Thanks.
Am I next?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Castellano.
No.
Kelly, and then Castellano.
So it's right down there.
Thank you for the opportunity to do this tonight. This is my first forum ever. I am not a good public speaker, but I strive to do better. I think I can go up from here. I think my decade of commitment to our schools, our public education, has given me a strong understanding in a lot of different areas, both as a parent, as an SIT member for 8 years, and working on various district committees to really understand how everything works in the interweavings. It's through this work that I've witnessed outcomes that we can achieve by engaging in open-minded discussions with collaboration with all of our community. I will continue to listen and contribute to the conversations involving our district's vision and priorities, and I'll remain committed to the core principle that has guided my volunteer activities over the past 10 years, that being the importance of every student's individual academic and social growth. As a public school system, we have a responsibility to provide fiscally responsible and innovative programs that deliver the best education possible for all students and graduate young adults who have critical thinking skills and insights to become active and productive members in a rapidly changing society.
Ms. Burrows?
First of all, for those of you who are watching on TV or because it's a recording because you were celebrating Rosh Hashanah, Happy New Year. I've dedicated my career to youth services and my volunteer efforts to our district schools. My service is deeply informed by both those experiences. After 4 years on the school board, my passion for making the district even better hasn't dimmed. We've made some progress in keeping kids from falling through the cracks, but there is, as we've discussed in detail tonight, much more to be done. I want to take what I've learned about how the system works and continue to push for greater growth and excellence for all our students. My other ongoing priority is improving communications. I am someone who truly wants to hear from folks because engaging in dialogue is the way to move forward. I welcome your emails or calls, and of course, on November 8th, I welcome your vote.
Ms. Bedford?
Thank you. I really didn't prepare a minute's speech since I'm unopposed, but I think it's important, given the sort of tone of this evening's conversation, to actually recognize that anytime we redistrict, parents scream loud and clear. They love their schools and they love their teachers and they aren't going to move and they get very angry. And that overall, what I'm trying to say is that we are blessed with very good principals and teachers in this community, and we thank you.
Thank you for hosting this forum. From my history with all of these groups, I understand why you've come together and applaud your public efforts here. I would also like to challenge you to continue to work together. Talking with Margaret Samuels the other day, I suggested that you should have a regular advocacy summit where you guys could share strategies for how to approach the district, both individually and for your collective groups, because all students need your voices in the process. All too often we see groups that are pitted against each other, and my hope is as a board member that I can bring changes to our district that will improve that situation. I also hope that improve the schools so that you will need to advocate less. That would be a nice thing, right? That we shouldn't have to push from the outside to see every student grow in an environment that consistently lives up to our values that we share in Chapel Hill and Carrboro. I think we share common goals, and I look forward to seeing it happen from the board. Thank you.
Thank all of you. This brings this remarkable forum to a close. We thank all of the candidates, not only for your thoughtful answers, but for your willingness to serve in this important capacity. We thank the organizations that have made this happen, who've worked together, the PTA and PAGE and the NAACP groups that have chosen not to be pitted against each other, but to work together, and that can only be to everybody's benefit. We also thank WCHL and Public Access Television for carrying this event so that it be available to those who could not be here tonight. And most of all, we thank all of you who are watching or here for your interest in this important issue, and of course, urge you to vote. Thank you.